Hey folks, alright, today we're going to talk about my file server. This is the second time filming this video. I actually filmed it with my old camera before the battery was shot, and I had a nice 40-minute detailed video about what I did to it, but PowerDirector screwed the whole thing up. So, we're refilming it. So, this might not be the video I want it to be. But it'll show you guys some of the cool stuff I did with the file server. I decided to completely overhaul it this time. New board, new drives. But I kept this case because, you know, it's a micro ATX case with 7 hard drive bays in it. That is pretty sweet. So, there you have it. I decided to go with real server hardware this time instead of just throwing together desktop hardware and calling it a server, which is fine on most builds that I do with servers, but I wanted this one to be, you know, top tier. Of course the air conditioning turns on. So what I did is I just did a complete overhaul, and I think it's better to just show you. Alright, so let's get the side off. Plus, you guys get to see it in better detail with the new camera anyway, so that is going to be pretty cool. As you can see, it's much different now. Yeah, this camera does a much better job, so you can actually see what's in here. This is a Supermicro board. Forget what model it is. Well, in any case, the model of the board will be in the description. It is a socket 1156 board. These took the 1156 socket Xeons and stuff. Has 4 gigs back here of DDR3 unbuffered ECC memory. That came with the board when I bought it on eBay, actually. So there you have it. 4 hard drives in it, and they're all the same. I decided to go with a RAID array this time, so I bought a bunch of drives for a RAID 10 array, and they're all Hitachi 2TB Ultrastars. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. This camera's not that great at focusing, so there we go. Hitachi Ultrastars. Got 4 of them in here. It's using the ACBell power supply still. I love these things. These things are designed to power 4 drives actually, so powering 4 off of this is pretty good. I think I could handle powering 6 off of it. I'm not sure, but you know, maybe if I add some more storage to this later on, I'll find out. I stuck a Pentium G9650 in this computer, since it's just going to be a file server. It really doesn't need much power. And on top of that, I put one of these Dynatron coolers. I was recommended these by Sansui358 here on YouTube. I think it's a Dynatron K17 is the model of the cooler. These are very good coolers for the price too. They're about $30 or so, and they're a lot easier to put together than the Hyper 212 Plus, the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Plus. These just use a backing plate you put on the back, and you just screw it right in. You don't have to mess with any hardware or anything. It's just a much easier process. So that's the basic gist of the machine. Just want some more detail on the board. If you notice the PCI slots there, or not the PCI slots, whatever. It has 3 X8 slots and a regular PCI slot. The top X8 slot has the cutout in the back of it, so you could put a graphics card in there if you wanted to, although it would run a bit slow at 8X. So, you know. What else does this board have? It has 6 SATA ports down there. It's quite a bit of fan headers. It's a nice board. It has IPMI as well, so you can do remote management of the board. It's got some nice server features, none of which I'm really using yet, but there you have it. Here's the I/O of the board in the back. Look at that. It has PS2, USB, Ethernet port for IPMI, serial, VGA. It does have onboard video actually, the board itself. It's pretty atrocious onboard video, but it does have it. So you can use a Xeon in here and still get video out of it. 2 Ethernet ports. I'm using the top one currently for networking. So that's pretty sweet. So it's not nothing real special as a server, but it's using much nicer hardware than I was using before. Well, actually, it's kind of the same grade of hardware I was using before. I was using a socket 775 Supermicro board. Now it's a socket 1156 Supermicro board. But this one is less of a desktop board because it has the ECC memory and it has all the IPMI features and stuff. Plus, I have the drives in RAID. Now, let me explain how this thing is set up. As always, I'm using Debian with SFTP access for the server, for the file server. So you just install Debian and install SSH, and there's your server. But I did something different this time. I decided to go with a Btrfs RAID. Btrfs is an interesting file system on Linux. If you've ever used ZFS before on Unix, then you might know about some of the features that Btrfs has. You can do RAID on the file system level, so you don't have to worry about software RAID through your motherboard or RAID cards or anything like that. It just does it all in software, which is very nice. You can mount disks. You can force disks that are degraded to in a degraded state to mount, which is very nice. And you can do all sorts of stuff. Right now in Btrfs, RAID 0, 1, and 10 work. 5 and 6 are a bit iffy, so I wouldn't trust those. I'm running a RAID 10 on 4 2-terabyte drives, so I have about 4 terabytes of space and 4 terabytes of redundancy, which is exactly what you need in a file server with mission critical crap on it. This has a lot of stuff that you're just not going to be able to get anymore on it, which is why I wanted it to be redundant. Like old video projects from when I was a kid are on here. There's a lot of precious memories and things on here that I don't want to go anywhere. Photos and stuff. So, I don't want any of that to go away. Before any of you scoff at the cable mess, you can just shut up. One thing that's interesting about this board is it has an internal USB port right there. Look at that. On some of these boards you have UEFI, so I'm thinking that is probably a way that some of these boards have UEFI, so you could actually use that to store an EFI boot partition on Linux if you wanted to. In fact, Sansu358 here on YouTube does that with his. He has one of these boards, and he does that with his. So that is the server. I've been contemplating adding 2 more drives to this to get 6 terabytes of space, but I'm not sure whether I'm going to do that because, number one, money, and number 2, can the power supply handle it? I love these power supplies, so I don't really want to give up using it if I don't have to, because in order to replace that, I'd have to buy something a lot more expensive. So one thing I could do is change the 12-volt rails around, but I don't know, that might be more trouble than it's worth. It could probably handle 6 drives just fine. I have friends that use these and they handle 6 drives, so it shouldn't be a big deal at all. So maybe these will be able to handle 6 drives. I'm contemplating that, but honestly, to make that work, all I'd have to do is add the 2 drives up here and then rebalance the RAID array to RAID 10 again with those 2 new drives in it, and Bob's your uncle. There you go. So that is the rebuild of the file server. I think this is much better hardware, much classier hardware, or even just a better setup. I mean, I really should have started using redundancy on my storage a long time ago, but the storage was too expensive for me to justify it. But I managed to get these 2 terabyte drives for about $65 a piece. So multiply that by 4, and that's how much. That was the cost of all this storage, plus the cost of the board and the cooler and all that stuff. So, that is the new setup. I think later in this video I'll show you how I did Btrfs RAID and how easy it is to make work. It is dead easy. I wrote down the commands in a text file, so I'll just go over them with you, and and I'll show you the Webmin interface that I've installed on here that lets you monitor your system without having to use command line utilities. You can just go to a web address and look at your stuff through a web interface, which is very nice. So we'll get to that after this segment. Stay tuned. Just before I show you what I did to make Btrfs work and all the other stuff, just like to show you the server where in its natural habitat it just sits here under my workbench behind all this crap I need to fix. It's going on years now. I really need to get to some of this stuff. But there you go, I just booted back up, so starting up off all the drives. And it is connected up to something that's a very naughty thing to do, but I have to do it. It's connected up to this router, which is wirelessly bridged to one that's just like behind that wall. Before people tell me just run cables across my floor, that's not how it works in this house. That's just not going to happen. But the performance is good enough for me. It works. So there you go, it's connected up to that router, which connects up to the main router, which is, you know, bridged to the entire network. These two servers back here are both bridged to that. So there you go. That other server is used to relay files to people, for those of you who are wondering. Generally, there are some files that are just too big for download sites. So I just use an SFTP setup to relay files over to people sometimes. It makes it easier for like video projects and, you know, big files basically. So there you have it. That's how it's all set up down here. So without further ado, let's go upstairs and take a look at what I did to make Btrfs do its thing. One thing I like to do on my computer is when I learn how to do something, I write it down. Like, look at all this stuff here. This Pulse Audio stuff is from 2010. I've been writing down stuff since then. Minecraft command Java optimization, that's from when I was running Minecraft servers a lot. And then there's how to use Screen, which is from 4 years ago. Screen is a program for Linux. I might have to make a video about that sometime. And there's, of course, the fixing the MIME type stuff that I've covered in another video. But what we want to focus on is the Btrfs RAID stuff. So let's open that with Word. Okay, so these are the commands I used. What you do to your system is when you install Debian, I would recommend doing this with Debian and not Ubuntu, because Ubuntu actually double labels the drives, which is something you don't want. When you're in Debian, when you do the installer, what I did with all 4 of those drives that you saw earlier is they were brand spanking new, so I gave them all a partition table. In my case, it was an MS-DOS partition table because I'm booting from BIOS. And I only formatted the first drive. I formatted the first drive, one partition, Btrfs as root, just slash. And I gave it no swap at all because it doesn't really need it, at least in my particular case. So I just formatted that entire drive as root. And left the other drives, they had a partition table, but I didn't format them at all. And then what you do is you just install Debian Linux as normal, Debian 8 in this case. So, you know, what I do is I install it with the SSH server, the file server, stuff, and that's about it. I think I put the web server stuff on there. I can't remember. I probably did. It's good to have the Apache stuff there in case you need it. So I installed all that stuff. I did not install desktop environment. You don't want to do that on a file server. You don't need it because you can do everything in the command line just as easily. And once that's all started up, you have to add the other 3 drives to the Btrfs array. And to build an array, literally you start from here. You start with sudo Btrfs device add /dev/sdb. And then put the slash next to it, which is the partition. You could do /home, you know, whatever you want to. You can basically you rate it based on the mounted partition, which is very nice. So in this case, I wanted to raid the entire drive, so that's why I made / the entire drive. But you can just rate it based on individual partitions, which is pretty cool, I think. So I did that on my bedside computer. Actually, as you guys saw, I used Btrfs RAID 1 on that one, and I just rated /home, but on this, I'm rating /, so the whole server, whoops, so on this I'm rating Btrfs /. On this I'm just rating /, which is the entire drive, so That way it boots off of everything and everything is redundant. So you start by adding the devices, and when you have 4 devices, you have to add the other 3. So you start with SDB, and then you do SDC and SDD with this command here, with the slash at the end. And then once you've added all the devices you need, you do sudo Btrfs balance start -dconvert equals RAID either 0, 1, or 10, or 5 or 6 if they've actually fixed those issues by now. When you're watching this video. At the time I'm filming the video, RAID 5 and 6 are a bit broken, so I would recommend against using those, at least at the time this video is being filmed. That could be fixed later on. So anyway, you do -dconvert equals RAID, in my case RAID 10, and -mconvert equals RAID 10 slash. Be sure to put the slash at the end, or not just the slash, but whatever partition you're doing. Slash home, you know, whichever you're doing. And then that balancing, if your drives have nothing on them, the balancing will not take that long. It took maybe 5 to 10 seconds when I did it the first time. However, if there is data on it, that could take a long time. So be prepared to just let that computer sit there for a while if you have data on the drives. And then if you're doing what I did and you use slash for the entire drive, you want to install grub on the other drives as well. So what you want to do is, once that's done balancing, you want to install grub on all those drives. What you could do, well, and yeah, after the balance, install grub on the 3 other drives. At least in my case, the 3 other drives. It depends on how many drives you have, of course. And then you can reboot, and you have Btrfs RAID. That is stupidly easy. You just type in a few commands, and you have RAID. I love this about Btrfs. ZFS, I think, is similar. That you can just run a few commands, and you have a file system level RAID. That is really nice. Plus, rebuilding an array is very easy. All you do is add it to the array and balance it. It's very easy. So, I think to replace a drive, I don't know what it is like replacing a drive, but I'm pretty sure the process would be just like this. You probably just add the device and rebalance the array, and maybe install grub again if you have root as the rated partition. But there you go. That's exactly what I did with my file server. It is dead easy to get RAID working with Btrfs, and I really like that. RAID 0, 1, and 10 are safe. RAID 5 and 6 at the moment aren't. They might actually... That might be something that they'll improve later on. So, you never know. But that... Whoops. Didn't want to zoom in. Still getting used to this camera. That is Btrfs. It's a very, very nice process. I'll post these commands in the description if you guys want to do these yourself. You know, I'll obviously I'll genericize the RAID part. I'll put like raidX or something, depending on what RAID you want to do. So there you have it, guys. The only reason to use Btrfs right now, in my opinion, is for the RAID stuff. So that's really all I use it for. And it also supports the file system also supports snapshots and supports SSDs pretty well. It supports SSDs just as well as ext4 does, though, so it really doesn't make much of a difference. But if you like the snapshotting and you like the RAID, the software or file system level RAID capabilities, then Btrfs is definitely your friend on Linux. It's a very nice file system. Now, the other thing I need to talk to you guys about is Webmin. Webmin gives you a web interface, and because I don't have a certificate on Webmin right now, Chrome is going to complain, and so will Firefox and any other browser. So you have to basically tell it, no, this is fine. And then you get a login prompt. See, Webmin gives you a nice web interface. So you enter your username and password. Then once you log in, you're greeted with a nice web interface. Tells you everything you need to know. That's the internal IP address, and the name of the server. Tells you what version of Linux you're running. Tells you what version of Webmin you're running. Tells you the date that's on the system. The kernel, it's 3.16.0-4 to AMD64. This will give me the information on the CPU that I couldn't remember earlier. It's a Pentium. It's an Intel Pentium G9650 at 2.8 gigahertz, which is plenty for a file server. Look how cool that cooler keeps the Pentium. Like that would work fine on a Xeon, clearly. So if I upgrade this to a Xeon in the future, that cooler can handle it no problem. Of course, the uptime is 12 minutes because I shut it off to show you guys the inside of the server. Now, here's the important thing with the Btrfs RAID. See how it says it says you have about 8 terabytes of space? Well, it's going to lie to you. When you have a Btrfs RAID 10 going, have those numbers. When you have a Btrfs RAID going, you're going to have to, at least with RAID 10, you have your numbers. So that's really about 4 terabytes of space. And it says 4.29 terabytes used. Divide that by 2, and that's how much space I'm using on the server at the moment. So it's about a little over half the space on the server. Here's a nice part about Webmin. You can actually do updates on the fly on here. Looks like there's some SQL libraries. So you can actually update your system using Webmin. So update those. So look at that. How cool is that? You can actually update your system using a web interface. That's how nice Webmin is. And this shows exactly, this is apt-get right here that it's showing. So this is something you normally see in the command line, but it's doing it through a web interface, which is very nice. So that updates some SQL stuff. Let me scroll down a little bit. There you have it. And that wasn't a kernel update, so there's really no need to reboot. Now, Webmin gives you a lot of options. You get configuration files. You can add users to the Webmin system so that people can log into this and look at it. MIME types. You can check disk and network file systems. You can actually reboot and shut down the machine using this. You can start and stop daemons, which is very nice. You can reboot and shut down the system using the web interface down there, which is very, very cool. Webmin's a very useful tool on Linux. It works on more than just Debian too. You can install this on any version of Linux, and it'll work pretty much the same. You have your Apache web server options, SSH, read user mail. That seems like an old Unix thing. Command shell, custom commands, SSH login, HTTP tunneling, file manager. File manager. I don't think I have that installed. Yeah, it's a plugin that I don't have installed, but apparently you can actually use there's actually a file manager on Webmin. So a graphical file manager. That's really cool. Networking, you can monitor bandwidth. Which is pretty cool. You can use there's Ethernet 0 that's there right now. Linux firewall. That's kind of cool. Hardware. And one plugin that I added was the smart drive status indicator. You can look at iSCSI, the partitions on disk, administer your printers, and look at the system time. The smart drive status, I think, is the most useful. There's the 4 Hitachi drives we have, so let's just take a look at the smart data from one of them. There you go. 2 terabyte drive. There's a lot of information there. So it gives you a nice readable attributes there, but you can also look at the full smart status report. To make this work, all you have to do is install SmartMon tools on your Linux system, and that'll fix it up. So this will give you the raw smart data of the whole thing, the firmware version, the serial number, the nice chart of all this stuff. These drives are new, so the attributes aren't going to be all that high yet, but it'll look exactly like that. You can also have it do short self-test, an extended self-test, and a data collection test of the drives, so you can test your drives using a web interface. And you can also manage Linux clusters using Webmin. So this is a very, very powerful tool. And in the unused modules, you can see you can do a lot with it. There's there's ADSL stuff. There's What else is kind of cool stuff? You can manage the Grub bootloader, which is pretty cool. iSCSI stuff, LDAP servers, Linux RAID. I think that's DM RAID stuff. MySQL server management, dial-up servers. Wow. Samba Windows file sharing, so you can use a Linux server to share to Windows machines. Usermin, which is another program they do. You can make a voicemail server for a PBX system, it looks like. So Webmin's a very powerful tool. It's very, very cool. I'm really only using it to manage the system via a web interface. That's about the only reason I'm using it right now. But for those of you that are into server stuff, it is pretty cool to have that available. Webmin's I think is one of the most essential tools for running a server. It absolutely is. So that is the new file server. It's a much more high-class system than it was. Rather than just being thrown together, I actually put some time and money into this and made a real nice file server with good hardware, high-end drives, all that stuff. So there you go. That is the overhaul of the file server. I think this type of setup will be something I'll continue to do in the future. I might upgrade the boards to newer ones that support UEFI or something, but you know, for the most part, this should be fine, honestly. For the kind of files I have, I might have to add 2 more drives eventually, and I might just do that later this year at some point, if I feel the need to. This feels like a setup I could keep for a long time and get lots of use out of. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video and enjoyed seeing my server become a real server for once. And yeah, there you have it, guys. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this particular video, and have a good one, everybody. Ciao.